This is the Campaign for Biblical Literacy Ministries and No More Lies. I am Kevin Campbell, aka Yah'kel, the mighty Hebrew Lion of Judah. Today's video is going to be about the True Israelites. Let's get started. One of the first things that I want to discuss in this video and bring out is an important point that the Egyptian civilization was a black civilization. The Egyptians were black people. And that's a foundation that I want to talk about because it's going to be important when I bring out certain scriptures. So if you don't understand and know that the Egyptian civilization was a black civilization, then there's plenty of references for that. You need to study that. But here is one of the walls in ancient Egypt. It's actually in the tomb of, I'm pretty sure it's Tutankhamun. This is one of the walls in the tomb. As you can clearly see that the Egyptian people were a people of color. The Egyptians was a black nation. Okay, now that we've laid the foundation that Egypt was a black nation and a black civilization, let's get right into the scriptures. Here we have Exodus chapter 2, and it's going to begin to discuss the birth of the man called Moses. So let's read Exodus 2, chapter 2, verse 1. And there went a man out of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes, and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein, and she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. All right, I'm going to stop at this point because what's happening is that during the time that Moses was being born, Egypt was killing the male Hebrew children. So there was an order and decree to kill the Hebrew children. So once again, when this child was being born, the mother hid him because she didn't want her child to die. So let's look at verse 4, Exodus 2, verse 4. And his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. So, and the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river. So the woman put her baby, this is the baby Moses, in the river and watched the child. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down and washed herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. She had compassion on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." There's an important point I want to make here also, is that they were called Hebrews before the captivity, and after the Exodus out of Egypt, they began to be called Israelites. So at this point, the children of Israel in Egypt were called Hebrews. So that's where you get the term Hebrew Israelite. So they were called Hebrews prior to the Exodus. After the Exodus, they were called Israelites. So here we have the baby Moses being born. And verse 6, she's saying this is one of the Hebrews' children. Exodus 2, verse 7. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee?" Verse 8, and Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, "Take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages." And the woman took the child and nursed it. Exodus 2, verse 10. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses, and she said, "Because I drew him out of the water." Now, it's important to understand at this point that this Pharaoh's daughter actually took the child and raised this child as her own child, as her son, in Pharaoh's house. And now we see here that Moses is grown. So the point I'm trying to make is this, that if this woman took this child and raised Moses, him, as her own son in Pharaoh's house, that means that this child had to be mistaken for an Egyptian. he had to look like one of the Egyptians. It would be impossible for the child not to look like an Egyptian in order to be raised up in Pharaoh's house. So we know that the Egyptian civilization was a black nation and black people. That means that Moses had to look just like an Egyptian, because if he was white, he would have stood out like a sore thumb. Nobody would have mistaken him or would have taken him to be Pharaoh's son or someone in Pharaoh's house. That's the point. So here we have Moses being brought up in Pharaoh's house. So once again, in order for that to occur, he had to look like an Egyptian. That's the entire point. In order for Moses to be brought up in Pharaoh's house, he had to look like an Egyptian. All right, let's go to Exodus 2. Let's go down to verse 16. Now here we have Moses when he left Egypt. Well, matter of fact, let's go back up to verse 11. And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens, and he spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. So Moses killed an Egyptian because he was abusing one of his brothers, a Hebrew. So as a result of this, he got thrown out of Egypt. So when Moses got thrown out of Egypt by Pharaoh, he went into the land of Midian. And that's what we have in verse 16. So let's go down to verse 16. Now, verse 15, when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. So instead of killing Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. So here we have Pharaoh going to kill Moses, but instead Moses left. He ran away from the face of Pharaoh, and he dwelt in the land of Midian and sat down by a well. Now look what happens in Midian, verse 16. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. Verse 17, and the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered the flock. And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, how is it that you are come so soon today? And they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock. Now understand that. Once again, here we have Moses being mistaken for an Egyptian. These women mistook Moses and thought he was an Egyptian. Once again, the children of Israel were always, not always, but most of the time they were mistaken for Egyptians. So you couldn't tell the Egyptians apart from the Hebrews in appearance. That's the point. Here, let's go to, now let's look at the book of Acts, and let's see who else was mistaken for an Egyptian. Let's fast forward to the New Testament, and let's go to the book of Acts. Let's go to Acts chapter 21, and we're going to start at let's fast forward into the New Testament. Let's fast forward about 700-800 years later, and Acts 21, let's go to verse 35. No, 30, let's start at 35. Now this is the Apostle Paul in the New Testament. It says, Acts 21 verse 35, and when he came upon the stairs, so it was that he was born of the soldiers for the violence of the people. For the multitude of the people followed after, crying, away with him. Verse 37, and as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, may I speak unto thee? Who said, can thou speak Greek? Verse 38, are not thou that Egyptian, which before these days madest an uproar, and leddest out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers? Look at this. Look at this. Isn't this interesting? We have almost 1,000 years later, a long time into the future, that the Hebrews are still being mistaken for Egyptians. Because, once again, The Egyptians were a people of color, and so were the Hebrews. So here we have Paul being mistaken for an Egyptian. Okay. Let's go back and deal with the man Moses once again. Let's go back to the book of Exodus. Let's go to Exodus 4. And now actually let's back up to Exodus 3. Let's go to Exodus 3. When Moses was in the wilderness, he saw an angel in a burning bush. So let's deal with that and see how the Most High dealt with Moses in the wilderness, because I want to bring out an important point from that as well. It says, now, Exodus 3 verse 1, now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And an angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. Exodus 3 verse 5. And he said, Draw not nigh hither, put off the shoes from thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. So now, Moses is in front of the Most High, or he's speaking to an angel. An angel is speaking to him out of this burning bush. So now Moses begins to engage in a conversation, and the angel reveals to him, verse 6, moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he's afraid to look upon God. Now God begins to discuss with Moses that he wants him to go into Egypt. Then Moses decides that, well, he really doesn't want to go, that he doesn't know what to say, that the children of Israel won't believe him. So then God gives Moses two signs that he should show the children of Israel that they believe that the Most High sent him. So let's do that. Let's go to those signs at verse 4. Verse 4, chapter 1. And Moses answered and said, But behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, The Lord has not appeared unto thee. So now the Lord is going to give him some signs. And the Lord said unto him, What is that in thy hand? And he said, A rod. Exodus 4:3. And he said, Cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled from before it. Exodus 4:4. And the Lord said unto Moses, Put forth thy hand, and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. So, this was the first miracle. Let's go to Exodus 4:5. That they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared unto thee. Verse 6. And the Lord said furthermore unto him, Put now thy hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. Verse 7. And he said, Put thy hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again, and plucked it out of his bosom, and behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. Now, verse 6 and verse 7, the second sign that the Most High gave to Moses is that Moses took his hand, put it inside of his garment, in his bosom, and when he took it out, his hand was leprous as snow. So what happened here? What was the miracle? So his flesh was turned white. That's exactly what happened. Once again, verse 6, and the Lord said furthermore unto him, Put now thy hand into thy bosom. Put his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. So the point I'm trying to make here is that one of the miracles is that his hand changed color from one color to another. So if his hand turned leprous as snow, and we know snow is white, what color was his hand before it turned white? It wouldn't have been a miracle if his hand was already white and it turned to a whiter shade of white. That wouldn't make any sense. That wouldn't even be a miracle. So once again, we see here that the Hebrews, the Israelites, the man Moses was a dark man. He was a black man. Once again, his hand turned from its normal color to white, then back to its normal color again. All right, let's get another witness. Let's go to the book of Leviticus. Let's go to the book of Leviticus, chapter 13, verse 24. These are the laws of leprosy. Now, biblical leprosy is when black flesh turns white. That's exactly what it is. According to Scripture, biblical leprosy is when black flesh turns white. So let's look at that. Leviticus chapter 13. Let's go down to verse 24 because I don't want to waste too much time in Leviticus 13 verse 24 and not read the whole thing. But Leviticus 13 verse 24. This will give you the gist of it. Or if there be any flesh in the skin whereof there is a hot burning, or the quick flesh that burneth have a white, bright spot, somewhat reddish or white. Well, that right there, that encompasses every Caucasian person that you've ever seen. So if your skin has a spot that is a white, bright spot, somewhat reddish or white, verse 25, then the priest shall look upon it, and behold, if the hair in it, in the bright spot be turned white, and it be in sight deeper than the skin, it is a leprosy broken out of the burning, wherefore the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is the plague of leprosy. So here we have it. White or reddish white spot on the skin is considered leprosy. Okay, let's go to one more. Let's go to Numbers chapter 12. So here we see what leprosy is when, once again, biblical leprosy is when black skin turns white. Let's look at Numbers chapter 12. And let's go here, and we have Miriam and Aaron. Miriam is Moses' sister, and Aaron is Moses' brother. So this is after the Exodus, after they've come out of Egypt. Let's look at what's happening here. Numbers chapter 12 verse 1. And Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman that he had married. For he had married an Ethiopian woman. Okay, so here we have Moses taking as a wife a woman of another nation, basically an Ethiopian woman. Now, it wasn't that Moses was white and he took a black wife. These were two black nations. Ethiopia is part of Africa. Ethiopia is a black nation. Egypt is a black nation. The Israelites are a black nation. So what's going on? He just took a wife of another nation. And this is one of the reasons why his brother and sister got a little bit upset. But let's see what happens here. Okay, once again. And Numbers, let's go to start at verse 1 again. And Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married. For he had married an Ethiopian woman. Verse 2, and they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Has he not spoken also by us? And the Lord heard it. Verse 3, now the man Moses was very meek above all the men which were upon the face of the earth. And the Lord spake suddenly unto Moses and unto Aaron and unto Miriam, come out ye three unto the tabernacle of the congregation. And they three came out. So the Most High is pissed off. He heard what they said about Moses, and now they're grumbling. They spoke about his servant. So look what the Most High does. Verse 5, and the Lord came down in the pillar of the cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forth. And he said, hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I the Lord will make myself known unto him in a vision, and will speak unto him in a dream. Verse 7, my servant Moses is not so, who is faithful in all my house. Verse 8, with him will I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in dark speeches, and the similitude of the Lord shall he behold. So the Most High is saying Moses is his servant. He speaks face to face with him, and Moses beholds my appearance. Then it says, wherefore then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And now the Lord is pissed off. The Most High is pissed off. Numbers 12 verse 9. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. Verse 10. And the cloud departed from off the tabernacle, and behold, Miriam became leprous, white as snow. And Aaron looked upon Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. So now, two important points. Once again, Miriam became leprous, white as snow. So what color was she before she became leprous, white as snow? What color did her flesh have to be before it turned white? It had to be some color other than white. Once again proving that the Israelites were a dark nation and dark people. Something else I also want you to notice. Turning her flesh white wasn't a good thing. According to the Most High, he was angry with her. This was a punishment. This is not a blessing. This was a punishment. So he punished her by turning her flesh white. So in the eyes of the Most High, white flesh is not a good thing. It is a bad thing. I didn't say that. This is what the scripture is saying. This was a punishment. This wasn't a blessing. So white flesh is not a blessing. It's actually a judgment from the Most High. Thus saith the Lord. Here in this picture, we have what the original Hebrews actually look like. This is a carving on a stone wall, approximately 680 BCE. That's about 2,700 years ago. This is on the wall in the palace of the king of Assyria. When the king of Assyria conquered the Israelites, he brought them into Assyria, and they would put carvings in the palaces of their conquests. So these are Hebrew captives of the king of Assyria. So you know how they say a picture is worth 1,000 words? There is no question that the Israelites, that the Hebrews were people of color. Okay, here we have, let's go to Matthew chapter 2, and let's discuss what happened with Christ when he was a child. So Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Now it says, now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem. So we're talking about the birth of Christ. Let's go down to verse 10. So what's occurring is that Christ was born and King Herod is interested in killing the child. So let's see what happened. Let's go down to Matthew 2, verse 11. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. Verse 12. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. Matthew chapter 2, verse 13. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt. And be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. So here we have the angel telling Joseph, take this child and take him into Egypt. And the reason that he's to take the child into Egypt is because Herod is trying to kill the child. So now why would the child going into Egypt be protection for that child? I'm going to tell you why. Because if he took him into Egypt, because the Egyptians and the Israelites were similar in appearance, that child would blend in Egypt. So the Romans couldn't come over there and distinguish one child from another because they were indistinguishable. The Hebrews looked just like the Egyptians. So that's why it was protection for the child. Now, had it been the other way around, had this child been white in the land of black people, he would have stood out like a sore thumb. Once again, it was for this child's protection. The angel said it was for his protection because Herod is trying to kill the child. So once again, there's another witness that the Israelites and the Egyptians were similar in appearance, and even Christ himself was a person of color. Now, let's go to, this is going to be the last scripture, and we can begin to wrap it up. Let's go to the Psalm of Solomon, chapter 1. Let's go down to verse 4. Here is Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. Wealthiest king ever. The wisest king ever in the history of this planet. The wealthiest king ever in the history of the planet. Now let's look. Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 4. Draw me, we will run after thee. The king has brought me into his chambers, and we will be glad and rejoice in thee. We will remember thy love more than wine. The upright love thee. Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 5. I am black, but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. Now, Solomon wasn't just dark. He was very, very, very dark. Solomon was what you call blue-black. As you see here, it says as the tents of Kedar. When you research the tents of Kedar was made from the wool of black goats, which was very, very dark. And it's comparing it to the curtains of Solomon. The curtains of Solomon was almost purple. So we see here that Solomon wasn't just dark. He was what you call blue-black. Very, very, very dark. The majority of the Israelites was like a middle complexion, like a light-skinned brown to dark brown. But here Solomon was extremely black. One more witness, and then we're going to close it out. I have in front of me a compact Bible dictionary, Zondervan's compact Bible dictionary. And what I'm going to read from this, on page 510, we have the term ruddy. And I'm going to read what it says here. Once again, this is Zondervan's compact Bible dictionary. Here we have the term ruddy, a word used to refer to a red or fair complexion in contrast to the dark skin of the Hebrews. One more time. I'll read it once again. Zondervan's compact Bible dictionary, page 510, the word ruddy, a word used to refer to a red or fair complexion in contrast to the dark skin of the Hebrews. There you have it. There you have it. If you appreciate the video, like the information, like the video, share it, subscribe to my channel. Once again, this is the Campaign for Biblical Literacy Ministries. No more lies. Shalom.